injuring civilians and destruction of civilian infrastructure have been recorded in the Republic of Adygea, Stavropol, Bryansk, Voronezh, Rostov, and Samara, and we continue to record these acts. Our investigative bodies continue to bring to justice the functionaries of the Kiev regime, their militants, the command of the FU, foreign mercenaries. On August 21st, British citizen James O'Connor was sentenced to 29 years in prison, serving the first 8 years in prison and the rest in a maximum security penal colony for smuggling weapons, participating in the incursion in the Kursk region, and killing a Russian citizen in the DPR. As far as the incursion of the Kursk region goes, 35 mercenaries have been sentenced, including in absentia. They participated in this incursion in August 2024, in April 2025, including citizens of Georgia, the US, New Zealand, Lithuania, Britain, and other countries. Now let's talk about Western journalists. During the last briefing, we talked about a despicable stunt of German journalist of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Michael Martens. I remind you that during the press conference in Belgrade on August 8th, he said about a possibility, and I quote him, of facilitating the killing of Russians. The journalist has been accused of a crime provided for by Part 2, Article 282 of the Penal Code of the Russian Federation. Incitement to hatred or hostility. He has been declared internationally wanted, and the Basmanny District Court accused him in absentia, and he was remanded in custody. And who's sponsoring all of this? On August 24th, Kiev hosted the Coalition of the Willing meeting, timed to coincide with another anniversary of the Ukrainian independence, which Ukraine is now losing. It has demonstrated the real situation, the real rift in the West, and demonstrated who is really sponsoring international extremism and terrorism. Only the newly appointed British Prime Minister Andy Burnham risked to visit Kiev. He attended this meeting personally. The rest attended through video conference. Macron, Merz participated through video conference. The main result of this gathering was the recognition that they must prepare for the fragmentation and occupation of the Ukrainian territory. You heard it right. They're saying that they are strategically defeating Russia, but they are now trying to disintegrate Ukraine. In their communique, they declared the creation of multinational contingent deployment under the guise of the ceasefire control forces. Exercises have been declared for October-November in the border areas between Ukraine and the EU countries. These countries are allegedly trying to settle the conflict and are trying to get their place at the negotiation table. We have been underscoring many times that any foreign contingents that are preventing the durable peace are unacceptable, and they will become legitimate targets, and the responsibility will be with those who has made the decision to further escalate the conflict. Some parts of the communique were the reason why many were surprised, and I quote them, the readiness of Zelensky to start negotiation. This is against the backdrop of the decree of Zelensky himself, number 679 of September 30th, 2022, where he prohibited negotiating with the leadership of Russia. He is ready, but no one knows for what. Specialist Nicole was mentioning the facilities of the cultural heritage, including the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, which is especially cynical because now the Kiev regime is now legitimately taking measures for the forced seizure of churches from communities by cancelling their permanent usage rights. During on the day of the coalition meeting, shocking details of the bloodshed in the Svetogorsk Holy Mission Lavra became known, where radicals killed monk Varsanofi and injured 2 monks. At the same time, the AFU shelled the Epiphany Cathedral in the town of Gorlovka in the DPR. For some reason, the communique of the Coalition of the Willing did not reflect these facts. Why? In the past, we would say that they are not engaging in any humanitarian issues, neither in church issues. Now, well, they are focusing on it more, but please make sure to look at the facts. The AFU shelled the Epiphany Cathedral in the town of Gorlovka, injuring 4 people. 2 of them were the priests, the humane participants of the so-called coalition. No one of the humane participants of the coalition has mentioned anything about these crimes. We have heard about new financial support for Kiev to support its destabilized regime, its military-industrial complex, armed formations. There is a zero efficiency of its systems. And the president of the U.S., Donald Trump's rhetoric has changed. Well, the British-French tandem has declared a new program, Freya, escalation. Zelensky was forced to declare bankruptcy. He said that the war became more expensive, and the search for means has become the main challenge for the existence of the regime and its survival. But we're going to talk about it in detail. We're going to talk about the mobilization. The visit culminated in a sacrilegious act. The European leaders, headed by the British Prime Minister and the head of the European Council, Antonio Costa, were transported to the military memorial cemetery, where they both bowed their heads in honor of ancestors of sons and grandsons of Nazi collaborators. They participated in honoring neo-Nazis, stood in solidarity with the policy of rewriting history, legalizing Nazism, glorification of criminals, and destroying historical memory. The U.S. representatives have ignored this event. Recently, Zelensky recognized that he misinformed Donald Trump regarding the readiness of the SpaceX leadership to give green light to using the Starlink satellite system to strike inland Russia. Said that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense gave him unfounded data. Maybe as far as Bucha goes, the data was also not proven. Maybe those victims weren't there. So it does not surprise us, because the Kiev regime is lying about everything that's happening on a daily basis. Now Zelensky made the same mistake, and Donald Trump had the opportunity to make conclusions. Now I'd like to talk separately about the destructive role of the leaders of France, Germany, and Britain. They are stoking the Ukrainian crisis even further. I'd like to note, on separate note, the destructive role of the Euro Troika, leaders of France, Germany, and Britain. Germany is now dreaming about creating, and I quote German officials, members of the government, they dream about the creation of the strongest army in Europe. The French and the British are announcing steps to transfer to Zelensky military technology, and Burnham, when in Kiev, underscored the continuity of the anti-Russian course of London and confirmed that the Britain transferred to the AFU long-range destructive means and gave Kiev technological data so that they can independently assemble Scalp cruise missiles, Storm Shadow missiles at Ukrainian enterprises, where the labor force is way cheaper than in Europe. Then, a bit later, we will be talking about it in more detail. By the way, a similar step of the transfer of technology was announced but not implemented by President of France, Emmanuel Macron. Of course, we've been recording all these actions. We've also seen the article in the Figaro newspaper where referring to the Safran French concern, said that for more than a year now, that concern has been supplying guidance system for Ukrainian British Flamingo cruise missile and navigation equipment and other systems for facilitating the strikes on Russia. London and Paris are frantically trying to remove responsibility from themselves, but they are directly responsible for these terrorist attacks. They should realize, all of them, not only those who are making these decisions, but also those who are implementing them in the West, that this is playing with fire and the consequences can not be forecast. British Prime Minister is going on and on about supporting Zelensky as long as needed, and I'm quoting him directly. At the same time, the London newspapers are forecasting a very bad final for the current Ukrainian leadership. The Sunday Times describing the current year as the most complex for Zelensky, the complicated year. Corruption scandals, the power vertical has ceased to be monolithic, the attrition of resources, the domestic policy of Ukraine has transformed in a fierce dictatorship where there are no constitutional rights for the citizens. This dictatorship has been justified by war, but the leadership is afraid of people and their fury. Recently, Zelensky has recognized that he's afraid of democratic procedures. He said that holding elections right now, allegedly, and I'm quoting him, will be a tsunami for the state that will divide Ukraine. So he's now beginning to understand that he and his servant of the people, servant of Zelensky himself, are hated by people. This is not blind hate. This is the real fury, because the Ukrainian people has been lied to, has been raped, and now is killed. Earlier, one advisor of the office of the president, Mr. Paul Delac, when giving an interview to Italian newspaper La Repubblica, excluded holding any election campaign because he said that it was not possible to ensure security.
It's somewhat strange, taking into account they are talking about the strongest army in Ukraine allegedly. It's strange that they are visited by all kinds of guests from abroad who guarantee them this security, and in different places we hear statements by Western leaders. They are ready to guarantee the security of Ukraine, but it's dangerous to hold elections in Ukraine. It's clear why. The result is predictable. The forced mobilization in Ukraine is underway. It's just beastly, brutal campaign. For the Zelensky regime, it's the only way to remain in power and physically to preserve themselves somehow. Now let us have a look at this brutal mobilization a little bit in detail. It's just beastly, it's inhumane. Because honestly, not every beast has such hatred towards those it can consider of its own kind, compatriots. It's just brutality, inhumane behavior, madness of those mobilization campaigns in Ukraine, of those territorial centers, so-called. Those methods were directly borrowed from Nazis of the Great Patriotic War times. In Odessa, some citizens who locked themselves in their cars in order to evade this illegal mobilization, and they started to pump tear gas into those vehicles, just creating real gas chambers literally on the streets of Odessa. But you know, there are, it's just, I'm not talking about conscience of the Kiev regime, it's absent clearly, but maybe some, just some traces of conscience should remain in Ukraine among those who can take decisions. Another symbol of the Ukrainian recruitment centers' inhumanity is the tragedy in Lviv. A body of a man was found in the Zakharova district. He had fallen ill during his detention, and the medics who have arrived were unable to rescue him, to bring him to life, and his wife suffered a severe medical crisis. And one more resident in Lviv injured the recruitment officer and inflicted him a fatal knife wound. The attacker was killed. He died at the scene from this injury. That's what Gogol mentioned in his work. The writer, who is so much hated by the Kiev regime. They are trying to deprive people of his works in the Russian language. It's just brother-killing tragedy that is underway in Ukraine. They're just not fighting, but they're just destroying themselves. They have long begun to do that. A group of locals in Vinnytsia with shovels and brooms rescued a fellow citizen, a fellow resident from the Ukrainian recruitment offices. Just we can recall the words of Dmytro Kuleba, Ukrainian former foreign minister. He said that when Ukrainians run out of weapons, they would go to war with shovels. But he did not precise against whom they will go to war with shovels. On the evening of the 25th of August in Ternopil, a crowd of young people rose against forced mobilization, and recruitment officers were injured. One of them was evacuated by the police who arrived, and those young men and women in Ukraine, they understand what is happening. They're just not feeling, they're analyzing the announcements regarding the lowering of recruitment age. They marched along the streets. And it was an information campaign that was to prepare the society for the idea of mobilizing women. Alexei Reznikov, former Ukrainian defense minister, participated in this campaign. He proposed to legally mobilize the entire adult population in Ukraine, including women. But taking into account the gender ideas have been adopted by Ukraine from the West, it's not clear exactly who he meant by women. Reznikov proposes to send women to rear echelon roles and to redeploy men to the front lines. But what is happening in the life of Reznikov himself? Two daughters of his do not hurry to go to the front line. They are engaged in interesting creative projects, just getting some unbelievable sums of the budget funds for their projects and so on. So that's the same thing. Just have a look what is happening with those relatives, close relatives of Zelensky's, where they are. Just those representatives of the regime, they just laughed when answering questions about their own plans in the participation in the Ukrainian defense, and not hiding the transportation of their own relatives abroad. Now they are working to lower the mobilization age threshold for Ukrainian young men. And this is again underscored in the statements of Alexander Koltunovich, a Ukrainian member of parliament. He noted that the Ukrainian parliament is currently incapable, it's a direct quote, incapable of anything other than helping Ukrainians burn in hell, end of quote. But Russian culture does not allow them just to feel as complete beasts. And they just destroy anything that just puts some obstacles to their beastly logic. They distract attention from real problems, and maybe just because of his black heart, Zelensky resorted to attacking Russian culture. He imposed sanctions. Actually, it's known to everyone. Creators of Masha and the Beer animated series, and now it will be success on the front, actually, obviously. They block all their social media accounts of this Masha and the Beer. That's what is to demonstrate their power, to enshrine his legitimacy, to underline his power. But the West, having counted and sadly counted, they're starting to guess what those Ukrainian migrants have done. They just put an end to programs that support those who left Ukraine as refugees, as some miserable migrants. They just stopped cynically. And all this story is moved towards Ukrainian mobilization. Markus Lammert, the EU Commission spokesperson, confirmed the introduction of restrictions. Now the Ukrainians are obliged to documentarily confirm, both men and women, that they are not evading service in the armed forces of Ukraine. Switzerland recently joined these harsh measures, restricting the issuance of migration status to individuals with unresolved military registration issues in Ukraine. So, what do you think? It's just a powerful story for the Western Europeans. So the European Commission answered the relevant questions, categorically refusing to react to Kyiv's urgent request for additional financial aid. I would remind you that Zelensky requested 220 million euros to subsidize interest loans for small and medium-sized farmers facing bankruptcy. Markus Lammert said there will not be additional funding and suggested instead that Kyiv survive using existing mechanisms. So what mechanisms do they have? Forced mobilization? If a farmer is not content with the lack of compensation for his losses, so go ahead to that bus with man catchers, and that will get rid of those problems. It will be a guarantee. So they just ready to subsidize only war for the Ukrainians to be slaughtered, not for their farms, but for the interests of the Westerners. Under the guise of the so-called Independence Day gift, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced the approval of 6.1 billion euros for weapons procurement for the Ukrainian army. But why not to relocate this money for Ukrainian farmers? Zelensky requested 220 million euros. Ursula von der Leyen just approved 30 times more. She approved 6.1 billion euros. So if it's 30 times more for farmers, just one bit, 1/30 could be allocated to the Ukrainian farmers. Of course, no. There is no such need for Brussels, only the need of slaughter. For that they always have the money. And this money is 6 billion. Kyiv will not receive them directly. They will go to the European Union defense companies, while Ukraine receives weapons in exchange for strictly audited contracts. They are called actually strictly audited. It's hell of a corruption in Ukraine actually. So that's interrelation with the West, such loans under the guise of a gift, an Independence Day gift. So they fail to keep pace with their own plans. The crisis affected the joint defense projects. The Flamingo solid rocket fuel plant, its construction in Denmark has been postponed to late 2027, and initially they planned to complete it by the end of 2026, and the costs have grown, you would not believe it, to 150 million euros due to construction delays and managerial chaos. Now the Black Sea region. As Zelensky shouted, and as they said in Brussels and other Western capitals, grain to be transported for the world not to suffer from food security problems. But now, after those 4 years of lamentations, what has happened? Zelensky continues to create a threat for Black Sea region states. The Romanian exclusive economic zone has been violated by the Ukrainian unmanned surface vessel. It's 18 nautical miles east of Constanța. The Romanian Air Force engaged 2 F-16 fighter jets and spotted the Ukrainian maritime drone, destroyed it from an onboard cannon. It's actually not the first time for Romania to be affected by those unmanned vessels from Ukraine. Some vessels operated by Turkish companies were attacked in the Black Sea. Nisibe dry cargo ship was attacked, and a 47-year-old crew member, Turkish national İlker Razolu, was killed, and 8 other crew members were wounded. So you can see that those mechanisms are turning against NATO countries themselves. These are the consequences of the reckless military supplies to the Kiev regime. The armed forces of Ukraine have struck 214 civilian vessels, flying the flags of various nations in the Black Sea this year. It's a cynical lie. What can be sold, what can be illegally taken, that is all used on Bankova. People are dying, and the Kiev regime continues to reveal its neo-Nazi essence. Let's take into account the perverse nature of Zelensky himself. It's the Hitler's forces destroying people in Bila Tserkva in Kiev region in 1941. It was mass extermination of children. Even Waffen SS fighters refused to kill those children, but to do that, to kill young children, 90 children, they were killed by Ukrainian nationalist collaborators. And now the ideological hairs of those atrocities are buried in Ukrainian military memorial cemeteries. And Europeans are invited to lay flowers at their graves. Zelensky is now heading this process, laying flowers to collaborators' memorials, to Nazi memorials. It's not only the betrayal of the memory of what his grandfather, Semyon Zelensky, fought for. That's how he is attempting to reshape the conscience of Ukrainians who, unlike Zelensky, have no assets, no possibility to leave Ukraine. And I would repeat, the tragedy of Zelensky and his family would be his tragedy. But he is trying to make the Ukrainian people swear allegiance to this neo-Nazism and the Nazis from those times. According to Zelensky, who is much quoted by the Israeli mass media, His great-grandfather, he was killed by those Nazis during the occupation of Ukraine. And Zelensky signed a decree to attribute the title of the hero of Ukraine, to Andrei Belitsky, a racist and founder of the terrorist nationalist Azov battalion. His record includes this so-called hero of Ukraine, leading the far-right Social National Assembly, participation in the extremist rights sector. Now, there is currently the 3rd Army Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, formed on the basis of this Azov unit. They gained notoriety for openly expressing Nazi ideas, using Nazi symbols, and expressing misanthropic, racist ideas. All this has been also mentioned by Leonid Kuchma back in 2003. That was the first who ordered to fire upon Russian soldiers. So, thanks to Kuchma, he has written such a book, Ukraine is not Russia. In 2010, wearing the St. George ribbon, he declared on camera, and I quote his words, "I will never agree, given that my father died fighting against Nazism and Hitler's Germany, to Bandera or Shukhevich holding the title of Hero of Ukraine." Back in 2010, Kuchma said, "It is simply inhumane." And those who do that fully understand that they are driving a wedge between people and nations. Not only must we refuse to accept this, but we must ensure it never happens again, so that no one is tempted to build a political career on such a thing. End of quote. So that's what Kuchma said in 2010. So in 2026, he keeps silent, but maybe he will also go and lay flowers to those burials of the remains of those punishers and collaborators.
Today, Kuchma approves the policies of Zelensky on rewriting history. He stands in solidarity with him and with his measures aimed at glorifying OUN, UPA. He has returned to Poland the Order of the White Eagle and boasts about personally giving orders to shoot at Russians. All the aforementioned facts confirm the relevance of the task to identify and demilitarize Ukraine and to eliminate threats emanating from its territory, and these goals will be achieved. Now, as promised, let's talk in detail about Britain giving intelligence data to produce Scalp Storm Shadow missiles in Ukraine. There has been a lot of information about these acts and these actions. I've given you a brief information. Now let's talk about it in more detail. This is the essence of London's involvement in Ukrainian conflict. The decision to deliver these missiles to the Kiev regime was adopted by the British in 2023. They were back then in the euphoria of preparations for what turned out to be a failed counteroffensive. Many British politicians considered that decision to be extraordinary. The government of the United Kingdom recognized that it was dangerous, illegitimate, and tried to convince its parliamentaries, its citizens, and even us that it was acting responsibly, and officially said that the system would be used, and I quote them directly, only on the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine. That stance was recorded in the corresponding note of the British Embassy to Moscow. At that time, the British were trying to demonstrate that London was preserving a modicum of common sense and did not want to unleash the Third World War. later on, the British side was trying to evade answering the question on real usage of Storm Shadow missiles, but at some point it was evident that those missiles were used against Russia. Such strikes later on went beyond the claimed operational area. However fictitious it may have been, which is not possible without direct participation of foreign specialists ensuring the operation and targeting of this weapon system. And of course, it also is not possible without granting by certain countries of NATO necessary intelligence data for the AFU. In May 2024, the then head of Foreign Office, David Cameron, interviewed by Reuters agency, said that Ukraine had the right to strike inland Russia using British weapons and armaments. And I directly quote him, like Russia has the right to strike inland Ukraine. I'd like to use a direct quote in English to convince everyone that he said that. The Ukraine, he said, has the right, just as Russia is striking inside Ukraine. And this is the direct quote. This hostile act directly contradicted previous official assurances of the British side that under no circumstances will Storm Shadow missiles be used on Russian territory. At the same time, by doing that, the British Foreign Secretary deliberately disavowed this principle, recognizing de facto his country the party to the conflict. Now we're here that London is ready to transfer to Kiev the intelligence data necessary to independently produce Storm Shadow missiles. The government of Andy Burnham understand what it will lead to, how AFU militants could use Storm Shadow missiles if they have this opportunity to replenish their arsenals. What our servicemen, of course, will not allow, but to pose the responsibility on Kiev puppets will not be possible. It's also noteworthy to see the attempts of London's politicians to remove the concerns by these escalatory actions among their own populations. The local newspapers started to call the Scalp missile, that very same missile, they started to call it Scalp, not Storm Shadow, trying to cover their tracks and to put the responsibility on the Frenchmen. They are glorifying this provocatory step and are saying that there is nothing escalatory about it. Well, the recent events do not leave any doubts that all the steps by the government of the United Kingdom only are aimed at the only long-term goal, to strategically defeat our country. As they say, these attempts are doomed to fail. We have repeatedly said that our response to Ukrainian strikes using the British weapons may be all the military facilities and equipment of Britain in Ukraine and beyond. The people who are in charge of these attacks against the civilians will be punished according to their crimes. Inevitable retribution will also befall their accomplices and instigators. We call upon all the citizens of the United Kingdom to think about the inevitable catastrophic consequences of these hostile steps of their own authorities. We call upon the British leadership to clearly analyze the situation and to immediately and decisively and unambiguously refuse the hostile aggressive line that can only prolong the agony of the Kiev neo-Nazi regime and which creates the conflict, a new nature of the conflict, elevates it to the new level. Well, now let's talk about German newspapers that talk about multiple deserters that flee that flee training areas in Germany. We have been talking about it since the beginning of 2022. We talked about it even earlier, in 2014. All those Maidan revolutions had been trained on similar campsites in the Baltic states, in Poland, and now we see that they are now trained in Germany, or have been trained for many years now. And this is happening in the very center, as they say, of the democratic European paradise. The Ukrainians are deserting there in Germany. I'd like to ask, how can the European Union explain the situation? I'd like to remind you of the words of the Kiev propaganda. The Kiev authorities were saying to Europeans that it was necessary to provide more funds for Ukraine because the Ukraine itself, according to Zelensky and his clique, will protect Western Europeans from Russia. Allegedly, because allegedly the Kiev army is the strongest one. They just need more money. Now, this self-proclaimed defenders of this flowering garden from the allegedly barbaric and violent Russia are fleeing, deserting from campsites in Germany. These are not hostilities that we are talking about. This is not an emergency. This is just an exercise. At a campsite, they're deserting this training. Who's going to defend Germany, as they're saying, Poland, the Baltic countries, maybe even France and Italy, from anyone whatsoever? These so-called defenders from the ranks of the AFU and security services to see that they're fleeing the training camps, let alone the battlefield. First and foremost, Die Zeit newspaper was brave enough and was able to go beyond the myth about the valiant Ukrainian servicemen and shed light on the unpleasant situation linked with the manning process of the armed forces of Ukraine. Second, and it is evident, the deserting Ukrainians clearly demonstrated that they don't want to fight for the idea of Ukrainianness in its neo-Nazi guise, for the corrupted authorities of Zelensky, for the European values. They were enlisted forcefully, not of their own free will. They were trained in Germany so that they can be later used as cannon fodder on the battlefield. This is interesting and should be interesting for those who don't know any history. 85 years ago, in Germany and in Western Europe, Ukrainians were fleeing concentration camps, tortures, where they were put forcibly because they were fighting against Nazism. They were fleeing, they were mounting riots, and they were tortured, shut down, but some people succeeded and fled and survived. But 85 years have passed since that time. And what is happening now? Now Ukrainians are sent to Central Europe, allegedly on a voluntary basis, to learn about the practices of the prospering Europe so that it can later be used by them under neo-Nazi banners, so that it can later be used against their previous compatriots, the sons and grandsons of those who, together with their, well, grandsons and grandfathers and fathers, fought against neo-Nazism. Now they're fleeing these training sites. in the very same manner in which they were fleeing concentration camp. It's an irony of history. Another important aspect. These cases of desertion are multiple. We're not talking about a specific serviceman who, well, has demonstrated his personal character. This is a growing trend. Everyone realizes what the situation is, so people desert if they can. The Die Zeit newspaper says that only in the federal land Saxony-Anhalt since 2022, over 80 Ukrainian servicemen have fled. And across Germany, a couple hundred cases have been recorded. In Ukraine, these deserters will be punished to 12 years in prison, but they are risking it and trying to find refuge in the European Union countries. The DPA agency said that the leadership of Bundeswehr has confirmed the cases of systematic desertship of Ukrainian servicemen from German campsites, but Bundeswehr cynically refused to participate in their search and said that this deserting situation was the domestic affair of the AFU. The situation does not require any special commentary. Bringing deserters back into the legal fold and determining their legal status is the domestic matter and affair of Germany. So in this circumstances, journalists would be wiser to address this question to the German authorities. Could this servicemen who have fled to receive the legal status in the EU, taking into account the statement of the Euro Commission's representative, Mr. Lammert? He said that there was a need for every Ukrainian asking for asylum to confirm that they are not dodging the draft. This meat grinder of the conflict just requires new victims. This is evident. The neo-Nazi ideologies of Ukraine, sponsored by the West, is demonstrated in the science sector. The Kyiv authorities are trying to unlawfully appropriate research findings of Russian archaeologists in Crimea. They were trying to do that during the 25th International Congress of Byzantine Studies that is taking place on August 24th to 29th in Vienna. Initially, Russian academician of the Russian Academy of Science, professor and chairman of the National Committee of Byzantinists, Sergei Karpov, was going to participate in this event, but he, on certain grounds, abstained from visiting Vienna. Which is noteworthy is that a couple of days prior to the forum, the Kiev court handed down a ruling saying that it was necessary to seize scientific materials of Russian delegates of Congress and sent corresponding requests to the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Austria that was going to enforce it, allegedly. Effectively, we remember in this regard the recent incident with the detention in Poland, the Ukrainian request Russian archaeologist Alexander Butagin. So this is a deliberate hunt in the West for Russian scientists. They should be really careful when visiting the international events like that. Now over to Moldova. On August 24th, Moldova celebrated the 82nd anniversary of the liberation of the Republic for the Romanian fascist occupiers. On the eve of this day, the patriotic forces of the country organized a number of festive events, a liberation and peace march with a wreath-laying ceremony at the Eternity Memorial in Chisinau, scientific and practical conferences, commemorative events, as well as literary evenings featuring documentary film footage and memories of the veterans of the victorious battles of August 1944. The Chisinau regime regime demonstrated its true neo-Nazi core. It has ignored this remarkable date for the history and refused to light the eternal flame at the Sherpin Bridge head. It was right there where 82 years ago fierce battles were held that predefined the result of the remarkable Jassy Chisinau offensive. We've talked about it in detail, and we'll give all the necessary links to the text version of our briefing. In Moldova, this act was called petty and mean, but those Moldovans who care, who think that this date was a symbol of bravery, national unity, independently lit candles in memory of heroes, liberators of their motherland. On the eve of August 24th, and on that day, the Moldovan authorities illuminated the parliament building in the colors of the Ukrainian flag and the Arch of Triumph in the downtown Chisinau, because on that day it was the Ukrainian Independence Day. In Chisinau, they found money for Eternal Flame. They found money to illuminate the building, but they didn't find any funds to commemorate those who did everything for the current Moldova to exist. They also opened an exhibition dedicated to churches and other cultural heritage facilities destroyed or allegedly damaged by Russia. Well, it shows what is more important for the Moldovan authorities now: to commemorate anti-fascist soldiers who laid down their lives on the altar of victory, or servicing the geopolitical interests of this short-term interested people. Well, we are going to give all the links about the atrocities that are now taking place in Ukraine against the Orthodox Church in Ukraine. The official Chisinau is trying to getting involved even deeper to service the needs of the criminal regime of Zelensky and its external handlers, sacrificing the interests of the Moldovan people. How else could you explain the decision taken by the Moldovan authorities to grant to Ukraine, starting from August 10th until the end of the year, a 50% discount to supply grains to Romania? Maybe it was the reason why Mayo Sandu and Zelensky exchanged state awards of their countries, the Order of the Republic and the Order of the Princess Olga. The same thing is seen with regard to numerous concessions of Moldova's sovereignty in favor of Romania. We see crisis tendencies in the economy of the Republic. They're handing over the country's entire economic sector to interest from Bucharest. In December 2023, the head of the National Bank of Moldova became ex-minister of finance of Romania, Anca Dragu, and the anti-money laundering services was headed by Daniel Maris Staicu. And other certain cases were also recorded. August 25th in media, we saw information about appointment of Minister of Economic Development and Digitalization of Moldova, of Deputy of the Parliament, former Minister of Economy of Romania, Claudiu Nesu. At the same time, the decree to give a Moldovan citizen was signed by Mayo Sandu on the very same day. Thus, the pro-Western forces of the Republic acknowledged their own incompetence and showed that there are no decent candidates for this post within the country. So they are just selling their own country to another state.
The people of Moldova just deny those initiatives aimed against people by the authorities of Moldova, whose aim is to destroy the identity, because the Moldovans honor the deeds of their generations, of their ancestors, and are not prepared to make any concessions. an announcement about a humanitarian event, but a very interesting one. The Atomic Cities Organization, supported by Rosatom State Corporation, implement the Atomic Dictation International Educational Project. This showcases Russia's achievements in energy, medicine, Arctic and space exploration, and it forms interest among young people, interest in engineering professions. The preparation, training of engineering specialists is of strategic importance. It is crucial to expand knowledge, to demonstrate the achievements. And this atomic dictation format creates a unique format, and it unites institutions, communities, and of course families. In 2025, the atomic dictation engaged over 120,000 participants. In 2026, it's of a new format. It will be a month of atomic knowledge, and competitors can join online or take the dictation in person at a registered venue. The detailed information, as it is customary, will be provided in the text version of this briefing, so we do invite you to join traditionally. Now, elections to the Parliament of the Republic of Kazakhstan on the 23rd of August this year. The first elections of the one-chamber parliament took place. The Russian observer commissions were included executive committee and the parliamentary CIS assembly, so those elections can be considered just and competitive, and they have allowed the implementation of the rights of all the citizens of the Republic for free will. And the Adalet party secured a confident victory. 17% of the Kazakhstan citizens voted for that Adalet party. It's widespread support for the policy of stability conducted by the current government and the protection of the interests of the Republic at the international stage. Now we draw your attention to the ODIHR OSCE Observer Report with unjustified criticism of the elections. So they continue their biased approach towards state, as they say, to the east of Vienna. We reaffirm our fundamental commitment to further strengthening our multifaceted cooperation, including parliamentary cooperation, in which both chambers of the Federal Assembly are to play an active role, and I am ready to answer your questions. Is International Life, Международная жизнь with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We would like to hear your comment regarding the announced and somehow imposed by the U.S. authorities secondary sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. As it is well known, Russia categorically rejects the practice of employing unilateral coercive measures that counter the UN Charter. It's yet another illegal initiative, and we will coordinate our efforts to counter it together with our core thinkers. It has long been turned into an instrument to punish those who are unfavorable for the collective West, those states that are unfavorable. So thank you. Is Ria Novosti with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. If you allow us, we have two questions today. I am RIA Novosti correspondent. Our first question is about the situation in Armenia. It's the new way of persecution against opposition political forces gaining momentum in Armenia. How would you comment on this? Naturally, we do not interfere in the Republic's internal affairs. We still consider Armenia a fraternal country with whom we share special relations, so we cannot remain indifferent to the political processes that take place there, especially if they're connected with our country, with our bilateral relations and so on. Unfortunately, the negative trend highlighted by President Vladimir Putin during his meeting with Nikol Pashinyan on the 1st of April. This is an escalation of repressions, real repressions against political forces who advocate for maintaining and strengthening allied relations with Russia. It's the development of bilateral ties that has been demonstrated during the parliamentary elections held in June.
Власти республики резко контрастируют с публичными уверениями официального Еревана о том, что там не предпринимают шагов для ухудшения, как они заверяют, отношений с Россией. Ожидаем, что политические партии и блоки, руководители муниципального уровня, общественники, активисты Армении, которые прилагают усилия для укрепления традиционного двустороннего взаимодействия, смогут спокойно принимать участие во внутриполитической жизни страны, вносить свой вклад в ее развитие, процветание. Ну и, конечно, показательно, что ужесточение давления на конструктивно настроенных к нашей стране политиков и общественников обходят молчанием те политические силы, которые, как они утверждают, это их буквально прямая цитата, несут демократию в Армению, прежде всего представители, конечно, Европейского Союза. Но мне кажется, это лишнее подтверждение того, что новые так называемые друзья армянских властей продолжают закрывать глаза на все, что хоть как-то способствует достижению ЕСовских целей применительно к Армении, а именно цинично использовать республику, ее потенциал и ее граждан в своем противостоянии с Россией.
Спасибо большое. И следующий вопрос у нас касается, как бы вы могли прокомментировать сообщение СМИ о том, что в австрийском городе Леоберсдорф на месте бывшего филиала концлагеря Маутхаузен планируется построить супермаркет?
Да, действительно, такая информация есть, и, увы, она подтверждается. Это информация о том, что планы строительства логистического центра и супермаркета в австрийском городке Леоберсдорф на территории одного из концлагерей, входивших в систему лагеря смерти Маутхаузен, уже перешли в стадию практической реализации. В связи с этим хотелось бы обратить внимание на одиозное заключение австрийского ведомства по охране памятников. Оно отказалось придать этой территории защитный статус ввиду якобы недостаточности материальных свидетельств существования концлагеря. Ну, я не знаю, если в этом мире есть понятие определения цинизма и примеры, которые могут подтвердить цинизм, я думаю, это лучший. То есть австрийского для вот упомянутого мною австрийского ведомства оказалась недостаточной, я не знаю, или неубедительной документально подтвержденная информация о том, что в этом самом месте с сентября 1944 года по апрель 1945 существовал концлагерь, в котором содержалось около
Are there any difficulties with that? And will the ODIHR
там, есть ли понимание, что делается. Мы регулярно информируем, и на прошлом брифинге был большой материал, и раздел, соответствующий на сайте, тоже открыли, и наши посольства на своих сайтах этой информацией делятся. Но я хочу сказать, что мы будем информировать вас регулярно с вопросами.
those countries? The information is regularly updated on the Russian Foreign Ministry's website and its Telegram channels and the online resources of online accounts of Russian diplomatic missions. Now the OEC ODIHR, the second part of the question, this notorious structure for its double standards in observation in elections, it will not participate in the observation of the coming elections in Russia. Under the 1990 Copenhagen document, we have invited several OEC countries to participate in the observation. We support universal election observation standards, but any dialogue in this Russophobic situation, unfortunately, it's their fault that we are not talking about any dialogue. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is RT channel with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova, RT Balkan channel. We have one question. How would you comment on the criticism of by the European Commission of the assistance that has been provided to Serbia in fighting fires? They said that regarding the aid received from Russia, it's underlined that the European Union count on Serbia as a reliable partner, and relations with Russia and the Putin regime cannot remain business as usual. It's a direct quote. You know those statements of the European Commission that they are against that assistance by Russia in fighting the fires. It's not only the relationship of the EU and NATO towards Serbia, but a clear prediction what will happen if Serbia trusts those Western promises. That will always be the case. Russia assisting in fighting with fires and the EU just inflaming hatred. Can they not provide assistance? Just help them, provide the assistance. implement a set of measures. What's the problem? They are not doing that. They want to save money, and it's their true relation towards Serbia and the Serbians. But that's cynicism. When this calamity is also a calamity for the European continent. But just to make such negative statements about the assistance by others. I beg your pardon, it's personal examples, some strange actions when we were children. We were just being naughty, and the children, elder children said that if you would have seen something like that on TV, you would have been ashamed. But if they would have seen something like that on TV, they would have been ashamed, I think. Yes? By watching such films or by reading some books, such novels, they would be ashamed, certainly. But why are they behaving like that? There is a response. Only because it's their true nature. And that's their true relationship towards everyone who they have historically regarded to be the second-range citizens, people. And the European Commission has demonstrated its deeply cynical approach to the Serbians, deprived of any compassion and understanding of the calamity that has happened to them. And the European officials have preferred to politicize even this tragedy.
They sent new criticism to Belgrade for its relations with Moscow. It is inhumane towards not us, but towards those who they are trying to convince to become part of their own peace, while we are sending aviation to put out fires in Serbia. The European Union are continuing to incite Russophobic sentiments against Russia. We extinguish fires, and the EU are dropping mud on our rescuers. Politics should not prevent humanitarian operations from happening, but this is the established practice of the European leadership. Bullets and munitions are supplied to the Kiev regime, and under those bullets our rescuers are risking their lives, saving children, women, and the elderly. We will continue immediately at any request to help our brotherly Serbian people, our friends, with no regard to views, rebukes from Brussels, because they cannot influence anything. But this is a reason for Serbia to think once again, who are those people who are promising Serbia a brighter future, if this is the approach that they're taking towards what's happening, towards the reality. Thank you very much. Sputnik Agency. Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We have only one question. Iran has threatened to suspend oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz when the economic war is continued. What risks does it create for global energy market, and how vulnerable are the alternative routes, the pipelines of Saudi Arabia, the ports of the UAE, and the routes through Turkey and Syria, according to Moscow's assessment? There are a lot of theories, and I anticipated this question. I want to give you a lot of statistical data, so please get ready. It was repeatedly noted that the resources of the Persian Gulf countries have traditionally taken a lion's share in the global energy mix. At the same time, the main artery to supply all the commodities was and has been so far the Strait of Hormuz. The unprovoked armed aggression of the U.S. and Israel against Iran and Iran's response initially deprived the global market of 20% of all oil, over 30% of liquefied natural gas, and 40% of helium. The main repercussions are the deficit, physical deficit, and higher prices for energy resources, disruption of transport and logistical chains, long-term damage to industry and agriculture of many countries, first and foremost the developing ones, and higher burden on state budgets and rank-and-file consumers. And the responsibility is with those who has launched this military escapade against Iran. According to UNCTAD, the navigation through the Strait of Hormuz has decreased by 95%. It led to a stark growth of prices for energy resources. At some points, the price of Brent crude amounted to $120 a barrel. With the cessation of active hostilities, prices declined down to $86 in mid-July. As of August 26th, Brent is trading at around $68 a barrel. According to OPEC's monthly oil market reports, the oil production by participating countries has reduced from 28.7 million barrels a day in February this year down to 20.8 million barrels a day in March. In May, this indicator declined down to 18.8 million barrels a day. This was followed by a moderate increase growth. According to relevant data of the organization, in July this year, the production amounted to 23.6 million barrels a day. It is important to note that the situation in Russia and in other OPEC Plus countries not part of OPEC was stable. The current crisis can also lead to a significant drop of supplies of LPG to global markets. I'll remind you that in 2025, the gas supplies through the Strait of Hormuz amounted to 110 billion cubic meters. This is 20% of world gas trade, 93% of LPG export of Qatar, and 96% of export of UAE. In case there's a new round of escalation of the conflict or an economic war unleashed in the Persian Gulf, the global and regional energy security are going to be struck even harder, especially including the upcoming, or taking into account, the upcoming heating season. The alternatives are limited. In this context, we are going to underscore the Russian efforts to maintain global energy security. We believe that the cooperation in the energy sector should be built on the equal and non-discriminatory footing, taking into account the interests of consumers and producers of energy resources. We protect the sovereign right of all the states to have their own energy resources. We reject any external interference in the affairs of other countries, the use of anti-market measures when fighting with the competitors on the energy markets, and we reject the requirements to countries to restrict the number of one's trading partners. We continue the dialogue and joint work with our partners in OPEC Plus to maintain the oil market stable and reliable. Supplies of Russian energy resources will allow our partners to ensure a sustainable economic growth and to implement social tasks and fight energy poverty and to ensure food security. Media Corporation China, Madam Zakharova, during the anniversary summit of the SCO in Bishkek, which is going to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the SCO, the key cooperation areas will be the innovation, development, and digital interconnectedness. There is a digital transformation going on now. What's your assessment of the potential within the SCO? How can we facilitate these two areas, and what are the expectations of Russia on the eve of the upcoming summit? How can you evaluate the role of the SCO in facilitating the multipolar world and building a more just multipolar world order? I'd like to remind you, and we have published a lot of materials about it. Well, this year is celebrated as the year of the 25th anniversary of the SCO. It has established itself as a prestigious, dynamically developing international association that contributes significantly to the establishment of the multipolar world order. It has vast political, economic, human, and civilizational potential. Today, it is comprised of 27 states, 10 member states, 2 observer states, and 15 dialogue partner states. It can objectively play the key role in strengthening such regional infrastructure that should be based on the equitable and durable partnership, sustainable partnership of our countries. At the upcoming summit that is going to take place in Bishkek on August 31st, September 1st, priority attention will be attached to facilitating the Russia-initiated process of complex modernization of the SCO, including the amendments to its charter, practical implementation of new permanent bodies of the SCO, the Universal Center on Countering New Challenges and Threats, and Counter-Narcotics Center, the establishment of a single category of partners of the SCO, and the adoption of English as an official language. We see that the turbulence in the world is persisting. It is very important for the world economy to establish advanced cooperation to deepen regional interconnectedness, develop transit potential, digital economy, higher cutting-edge technology, ensure stability of energy markets. It is still very relevant to establish an independent financial infrastructure, including an optimal mechanism of financial assistance to project activity. You know that in Moscow, on November 17th to 18th in 2025, the Council of Heads of Government of the SCO member states meeting took place. Its aim was to speed up the adoption of digital technologies across industries, social sphere, and state governance. A number of documents aims us at practical work to promote our cooperation in digital transformation, creative industries, the development of startups, science and innovation, AI, the creation of the pool of technical parks and innovation clusters. We expect interesting discussions in Bishkek during the SCO Plus meetings. We expect representatives from Laos, Vietnam, Egypt, Togo, and a number of other countries. The strengthening of the potential of the SCO and its role in international affairs is one of the key areas of the concept of foreign policy of the Russian Federation. Russia has initiated the preparations for its future chairship in this organization in 2027-2028. An organizing committee has been established as well. We're now working on a conceptual vision of aims, goals, and of course, active work is underway to establish and plan different events for the aforementioned period. Thank you very much. Reuters. Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We do have 2 questions to you today. I'd like to start with Bashar Assad, that the Syrian court in absentia sentenced to capital punishment, accusing him of tortures, deliberate killings, and arbitrary arrests, and so on and so forth. How can you comment the sentence of the Syrian court, and will this influence the status of the political asylum granted by Russia to Bashar Assad, and can Russia consider extraditing Bashar Assad to Syria? We have repeatedly commented this issue on the so-called extradition of Bashar Assad. I'd like to reiterate our principled stance. There is no political underpinning in our decision to receive him in our country. It was only a humanitarian decision. Those were the dramatic events, change of power in Syria, and he was under threat of death as well as his family. So I cannot add anything else to that information. But well, it was just a little update that you requested. So I think it was a good one. Well, it's not even about updating, but rather about reminding of what our stance is. Let us move on. Madam Zakharova, excuse me, I have one more question, if you allow. On Tuesday, the Spiegel journal said that a Ukrainian that was located in Romania is accused to be part of a net of agents associated with Russia. How can you comment on this report of German journalists? These are never-ending information and political manipulations that we are facing. If this is to their benefit, Ukrainians and Ukrainian special services are associated with this reckless and triumphant policies of the West. Whereas when Ukrainian secret service members are caught doing something illegal, Russia is accused of it. You see what's happening, and we see it each and every time. The same is happening to the UAVs that drop on the territory of the European Union. The same thing happens with underwater UAVs. I talked about the Black Sea region. If you remember, we see the same thing happening. Ukrainian UAVs sometimes are a good thing for Western journalists. Sometimes they're not. If not, they're trying to find Russian tracks. They don't have any proof. Then they say that there's no proof of Russian involvement, but they don't cover it as widely as other things in the media. Just look at the Nord Streams. It is the same situation. When the terrorist attack happened against them, Western media started to look for Russian involvement. And you remember what journalists wrote in their publications. And we talked about it as well. Then they gritted their teeth and started, well, double-checking other versions. And it turned out that it was not Russia, but it was Ukraine which left their tracks there. There we saw other insinuations, but then they rejected that version altogether. The Kiev regime carried out terrorist attacks against Russia and the European Union. We saw what happened in Monaco. They sent diplomats to their home countries, imposed sanctions, and against this backdrop, we see very attempts to come up with some kind of a punishment. I'm not gonna even go into detailed discussion of what happened. I'm not interested in what happened to that person. Well, what are you talking about really when children, hundreds of children, are killed each and every day? See what happened to Belarusian children. Women, your fellow reporters, are killed every single day. Hospitals, schools, residential buildings are attacked. and you were talking about some kind of a car that was carrying some kind of a terrorist. What about the attack on Starobelsk? No one is talking about it. The coverage was hardly there. No Western media outlet has shed light on this tragedy that befell the teenagers, the children. What about the attack in Krasnodar, or the beaches in Crimea or Gelendzhik? This Ukrainian in the car that was transported somewhere in the trunk. This is not worthy of our attention. The tragedies that are real tragedies do not pay that much attention to the real tragedies, and your news agency is doing that as well, is not paying enough attention to these tragedies. We should pay respect to the victims of these tragedies. Lentaru.
Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Lenta.ru. We have 3 questions today. On the 23rd of August, the Office of Zelensky announced the possibility of reviving the negotiation process with Russia, and there had been reports earlier regarding alleged non-public contacts between the Ukrainian and the Russian sides. Are there any details about those contacts and the negotiation process? I cannot confirm those statements, and that information about contacts with the head of the Zelensky's office, Budanov. You know, many statements in Kiev are made today for some media effect, for several reasons, in order to conceal the violations made by Bankova authorities. There have been no proposals from the Ukrainian side. And I would remind you that the Ukrainian side unilaterally withdrew from the Istanbul format discussion, and it was without providing any clear explanations. That's the fact. Thank you. My second question. The Times has reported on a new peace plan from Kiev that includes a ceasefire and the withdrawal of Russian and Ukrainian troops, the creation of a buffer zone. Do I get it right that Moscow is not familiar with this plan and sees no basis for negotiations? You know, I think everyone understands now that serious initiatives regarding peace settlements are never published in the press. If that is done, it's just some attempts to demonstrate their readiness and not to make a step towards the resolution of the conflict. It's just creating some visibility in the media space, and I see no point in commenting such leaked stories, such fake stories, and there have been no official proposals via the existing communication channels. There have been no such proposals, but Russia has never closed the door for dialogue and political diplomatic settlement. This dialogue should not be conducted in the language of ultimatums, as Zelensky pro-Western patrons do, but rather it should involve compromise, seeking solution, and taking into account the interests of all parties, including, of course, our country. That's just the assessment of the situation on the battlefield, where the armed forces of Ukraine are retreating daily. And you should recognize the inevitability of achievement of the goals of special military operation. And those principles were outlined by the President of Russia in this very hall on the 14th of June 2024, and they still remain relevant, as well as the statements by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. Thank you. Our last question regarding Nikol Pashinyan. intention to quit the EAU and to apply for EU membership in the near future. What is your view regarding this engagement by Yerevan? You know, it's just direct incompatibility of the regulatory frameworks of the EU and the EAEU, and Yerevan is to coordinate its integration aspirations, is trying to benefit from Russian integration and to move towards the European Union. Such tactic by the Armenian authorities just does not appear decent. The Republic intends to secure the advantages of the EU membership without sacrificing the privileges of the EAEU. And if the EU would not conduct such a destructive policy, just focused on the disruption of integration and economic cooperation ties in the mentioned space, in the EAU space, we could have considered some possibilities, but here there are no possibilities because the EU does not conceal that the EAU is a target for striking, for imposing defeat, not for competition, but just for destruction. It's just this illegal policy, trade wars, instruments, direct conflict, economical, political, and so on. But let us come back to Armenia. We discuss, according to your question, that this policy has no political and economic framework. It should not be implemented, and in case of the EU membership, Armenia would inevitably have to quit the EAU preferences, and there will be deep contradictions within the EAU, and the primary blow is not just someone's wish, but it's the mechanism of Armenia's membership. Moscow has on many occasions and with a lot of patience warned that such policy would make the EAU relations more difficult, and in the long term Armenia risks not only fail to enter the EU but to disrupt the EAU relations, partner relations, including Russia. The experience, for example, of Turkey, the EU accessions can drag on for decades after an application is submitted, and this success is not guaranteed even after years of preparation. Even taking into account Turkey's NATO membership and its involvement in the Western political sphere. But as for Armenia, in its case, the risks grow due to direct conflict of legal and economic regimes of the EU and the EAEU. Like Turkey, it does not participate in other integration associations that would contradict, but it is still not allowed into the EU. But here there are the EAEU integration obligations. This conflict is of a situational nature, not just situational, but of systemic nature. Thank you. Is ITV News with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova, ITV News, Great Britain. One question to you regarding the British Prime Minister visited to Kiev. Do we get it right that Moscow is ready to attack the UK territory, and how far are they ready to go? Maybe there is already the list of sites But have you heard today? Maybe you have missed something. If you will be telling it to your audience, maybe you would repeat, and I would tell you whether you have understood it correctly or not. Actually, I would like to clarify with you. Yes, we will come back to your question, but you have quoted me, and you have said that Great Britain, its territory, and then you have mentioned it. I have already named the clear sides today. So have you heard that? But which sides? It's just impossible. Just to have this one-way communication. Maybe you have not got it right if you are putting a question like this. Maybe some military sites. Possibly, but I have just said it directly. I have a feeling there's a distortion from the very moment of a question. I'm telling about scalp, storm's shadow, weapons supplies where they're manufactured. And now you are talking about British territory. And in 5 seconds you will convert it to strike the British, but it's the critical importance, critical difference. Now I will never tolerate that when even through a question it's distorted quotations, but those statements have been made just 30-40 minutes ago. Regarding your question, please be patient because I would like to answer that question in detail. If you have some ideas for them not to be distorted, let us have a look at our Russian-British relations. You know, I have recently seen some conclusions, some deliberations that are more like speculations that Russia is decreasing the level of those relations. They just have long been in a state of deep crisis. Political dialogue is frozen. There are no intergovernmental contacts. It's just purely technical, routine work via diplomatic channels. Economic ties, cultural and academic exchanges have been virtually severed. Ordinary person-to-person contact has been made difficult. There is also beastly Russophobic rhetoric by Britain and by its mass media. And the initiator of the situation is the British side, solely responsible. For decades, destructive steps have deliberately been taken and loudly publicized. They have been so proud of them. Those long-standing provocative propaganda efforts at turning British citizens and governments of third countries against Russia. Some demands to sever contacts, to stop the implementation of agreements, and to dismantle the military and diplomatic communication channels. By expelling our military attaché on a fake pretext, the launch of a foreign influence registration scheme, which imposes a discriminatory regime of intensified control, all that accompanied by a destructive, cynical, inhumane policy that is just pursued at the cost of Ukrainian lives and the interest of British subjects. So we have just spoken about it openly and publicly. The new cabinet, led by Andy Burnham, hypothetically had a chance to start from a clean slate, but it was hypothetical. Just to go away from that crisis, that impasse where his predecessors have ended in. Whether he had some possibility to choose negotiations, but he has chosen just simple, I don't know, dangerous way of further escalation of the Ukrainian crisis and Russian policy that has become a true Russophobia. For example, the Burnham government has started to demonstrate obvious closeness to the terrorist regime in Kiev, announcing new arms shipments, supporting various anti-Russian coalitions, and supporting its European partners to get involved in the conflict even more. So now the UK Prime Minister made his first foreign visit not to Washington and not to Western Europe, but it's just clear lies and historic contradictions, but he goes to Kiev. So now that's the new partner of London, and he has promised to assist the head of the terrorist regime with the production of Scalpers, Storm Shadow missiles, but that I have said about it in detail, to be used to strike against civilian targets in Russia, but strikes against civilian population, against children, for the British money, for his money, just no disapproval, no words about human rights have been said, neither to the Kiev regime or to his own compatriots. London has gained access to Ukrainian combat data to train military artificial intelligence models. No one has remembered even the human rights. It's a clear demonstration of the policy conducted by Great Britain. It's clear support of terrorism, its sponsorship and the destruction of civilian population. Direct sponsorship of terrorism. It's just not about bad or good relations of Moscow and London. It's just another stage of a problem. By persisting with the current policy, the United Kingdom is violating its international legal obligations and facilitating the proliferation of dangerous military technologies across the continent and the entire globe. Its transformation from a de facto accomplice in aggression into a de jure one, and the consequences will follow. We have also mentioned that. And ordinary British citizens, they seem unaware of such a policy by official London. They are talking about some democratic policy, and bin Laden also used to adhere to that democratic policy. I remember those articles in the Western mass media outlets. Just the British citizens are not asked about that. And the existentially important decisions are taken without consulting the ordinary citizens. And regarding the media blockade in Britain, in the media, they have no idea what the Kiev regime really is. I would like to highlight once again, even if they had expressed some views for Downing Street, that would be of no importance at all. By being one of the oldest democracies, Britain has just lost all that. and Burnham had received some mandate for that escalation. And how he has been elected, how he came to power, there has been no mandate through a direct election for him. Now that's the British establishment, the magnates of military-industrial complex and immoral start-uppers in the high-tech sphere. They are just celebrating while London politicians score points among their own kind on the international stage and convince their own population of the existence of some mythical defense dividend. I have seen such headlines. It's also the tragedy of London. It's historical thing, the involvement of Britain in terrorist attacks against Russian citizens. Unfortunately, I follow your news, the news of your channel. It deliberately, we would leave it for discussion, of course, but it creates a distorted picture of the events. It's disinformation, propaganda, but that's it. It's intimidation of the population in order to stick the image of an enemy to our country, saying that Russia is to attack soon, and keeping silent about Britain supporting technologies and weapons to the Kiev regime that commits terrorist attacks against citizens of our country. And the British mass media just collectively destroy the standards of independent journalism. They used to be proud of them, but now, in fact, they just abandon them. They do not doubt those unjustified statements by the authorities about the alleged Russian threat.
We're talking about militants of Azov, for example. They clearly forgot that they recently were talking about the neo-Nazi nature of these formations, or just remember, for example, how they talked, how they praised the atrocities of Banderites. That cannot provoke anything but condemnation, because it's a criminal activity. Take cyber fraud, terrorist attacks, recklessness of Ukrainian militants. All of this is covered in one and only way. This is the terrorist attacks against Russia, its citizens and infrastructure. They turn a blind eye on systematic and deliberate attacks, brutal attacks of the AFU against civilians. It's a good question that I can address to you. Do many British media outlets talk about an aerial attack on Lugansk in 2014, on grudge shelling of the market in Donetsk, on the attacks of Kharkov residents in 2022, on strikes using the Western arms on Belgorod in 2023, on the Sevastopol beach in 2024, where there were children, on citizens or residents of the Kursk region that were tortured in their own homes, other civilians that were killed by the AFU, tortured, that the Kursk residents were subjected to, on the recent tragedy in the town of Starobelsk. Have you commented on it in your reports? But you're talking about Bucha. Do you have a list of victims in Bucha? Can you provide names, full names, places of their burial? No, you can't. The British officials are visiting this place, but you don't talk in detail what happened there in reality. It was an act of provocation. organized by Britain and Ukraine. And these countries propagated the disinformation about Bucha because they wanted to disrupt the 2022 negotiations. And Boris Johnson, the then Prime Minister, reported on to Zelensky. They had this plan to disrupt any negotiation. Now they're implementing these plans. The most dangerous thing of this information campaign, this policy, is the fueling the situation with their reports justifying everything and everyone so that London can implement its plans on this track. So I just couldn't help but commenting on this. British journalists are confusing restraint with something else, are scoffing at our clarification of what such policies can lead to by London, and that they are just distorting everything. The supplies of weapons used in terrorist attacks against civilians, this is what a legitimate target is. And you're talking about the territory of Britain. You're saying it on air as we speak. I think it's quite enough. Good afternoon. I'd like to apologize. I'd like to clarify. It's just I've heard just some comment from another journalist. But do you have any other questions to me today? Any additional questions? Some follow-up questions, maybe? Maybe you can say something to the new Prime Minister. You think it hasn't been enough? And the question is, can you deliver any messages to the new Prime Minister? Well, I've done enough. Well, thank you. Thank you. If you wish, we can provide you with more information on the matters that are of interest to you. If you are willing to receive this information, you're brave enough to report on it. Do we have a news front with us? Just one question, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. If I don't sound quite clear, I apologize. I've just been to the dentist. The Finnish president called upon the Western countries to elevate the economic power. President of Finland called upon the West to more actively fuel the Kiev with long-range weapons to elevate the economic power of conflict, justifying the AFU strikes on marketplaces. Stubb said that the AFU attacks on Wildberries was reasonable military strategy and the only means to bring Russia to a negotiating table. Would you call it when president of one country calls upon collective joint efforts of other countries to launch strikes on other sovereign states? How can Russia assess this assessment of Alexander Stubb? What consequences can Finland expect? Well, Mr. Medvedev has already said that it is not acceptable if the head of the state says something like that, and he's not showing respect to the people that elected him. The citizens of Finland elected a president who would treat them with respect. They couldn't even think that he would diminish their interests by propagating xenophobia. By doing some statements, he is shaming his own people, his nation. Did the Finnish people give such authorities to Alexander Stubb? Oh, well, you should ask them. As far as I know, they didn't, because there was nothing of that sort in his pledges and promises. He said that Finland would prosper, that business will be strengthened, but this runs counter to everything he said. What is happening now runs counter to everything he had said during the run-up campaign. This is a monstrous, bordering with neo-Nazism stances propagated in the media of Finland, and they don't even notice how vulgar it is and how incompatible it is with the position that he's now in. He promotes this position at multilateral platforms when talking to his allies. When he visited Ukraine on the day of its independence, there was one example, telling example that became the hallmark of Alexander Stubb. He does not act in accordance with the purview that the Finnish people gave him when they voted for him. He acts in accordance with the role given to him by NATO. The Finnish people weren't asked whether they want to be in NATO. It's now the burden that Finland bears, that Alexander Stubb is bearing, and he should act in accordance with it as a young NATO member. He justifies the Kiev regime in the terrorist attacks and even encourages this regime to carry out new attacks, calls upon third countries to support these attacks, and tries to put Finland on the list of those complicit in the attacks and share the responsibility for the attacks. But he's keeping silent about it. But one should remember what it is. We believe that Alexander Stubb should realize that marketplace storages that you talked about, any other storages of any other shopping centers that are attacked by the FU in recent days, are pure civilian facilities. There you would only see civilians working. Moreover, they are servicing millions of civilians. We're talking about consumers, producers of consumer goods, both in Russia and abroad. But he is describing these marketplaces as a military purpose objects, but if he understands that this is a purely civilian object and justifies its destructions, its infrastructure, and the people, he is, in this case, the terrorist himself. Dmitry Medvedev gave a good definition to it, and I'll add to it that there's no military competitive edge that can be gained through the destruction of marketplaces in Russia. We should also note that the statements of the Finnish president are aggressive, amoral. They justify and encourage terrorist attacks. And we see that weapons and ammunition are supplied to the Kiev regime. Since 2022, Finland has supported Kiev to the tune of 4.6 billion euros. Finland is participant of many coalitions of the willing. In 2024, Finland signed with Kiev a long-term agreement on cooperation in security and support. What kind of support is that? How is it implemented? Is it implemented when Russian citizens are killed? Maybe Alexander Stubb should talk to his voters. And there's also contradictory nature of the statements of Alexander Stubb with regard to our country. On the one hand, he calls upon restraint, isolating our country. On the other hand, and I directly quote him, it is important to establish the Russian-European dialogue at a certain stage down the road. This is outrageous. It causes bewilderment and nothing else when you listen to such statements. He's not genuine. He's hypocritic, and his train of thought is criminal. We closely monitor all unfriendly statements coming from Finland and other Russophobic stent, and no hostile act will be left without retribution, and we will respond in full accordance with our national interests. Russia will steadily and progressively achieve the goals within the framework of the special military operation. Thank you very much. Do we have Newsroo with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have a question about Prime Minister of Britain, Andy Burnham, who confirmed the transfer of technology for Scalp missiles during his visit to Kiev. He said that London intends to strengthen the anti-missile system of Ukraine and to help Kiev to produce its own missiles. How does the Foreign Ministry assess these statements? I think that in the introductory speech and when I was responding to other questions, I commented in detail on the production of the Scalp missiles. The newly appointed Cabinet of Ministers, headed by Andy Burnham, deliberately chose to follow further escalation and being complicit in terrorist attacks. He understands clearly that the transfer of technologies will be used to produce weapons that the Ukrainian regime will use against civilian infrastructure citizens in Russia. And the Kiev regime will also hunt for children. They love it. They indulge in killing children of all ages, like vampires. So the Great Britain approaches the stage where it will become de facto or de jure and de facto accomplice in these crimes. I think this is seems to be the ambition of the new government of Great Britain. So it wants to play that role, but well, you'll see corresponding consequences of such policies. Do you have any other questions? They also talked about the idea of stopping Russia from preventing Russia from producing its own missiles. But what would be our reaction to it? Well, the reaction will be given by relevant agencies. This is our security services purview. Do we have Al-Mayadin with us? Al-Mayadin Agency. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, said recently that Israel, the U.S., Turkey, and Russia have reached an agreement on segmenting or on sharing the influence in Syria. Even before the Bashar Assad's regime fell. How would you comment on it? I've heard this comments, but I didn't see any verifiable proof, so I don't think it would be reasonable to comment this gossips. If you are able to find a quote, please send it to us and we'll come back to it. I'd like to remind you that Russia treats with respect the territorial sovereignty of all countries of the world. We don't talk in terms of neo-colonialism, like sharing the influence, spheres of influence. Our country establishes relations with its partners on the equitable and mutually respectful, beneficial footing. We have a long, rich history with the leadership of Syria. We are linked by a long history of friendship and cooperation. Russia promotes the idea where territory of Syria is not used as an arena for geopolitical cooperation or some kind of other games between other countries. We think that the common responsibility of our constructive states in the region of the Middle East and beyond to avoid any steps that can provoke another round of escalation in Syria. We believe that it is necessary to consolidate international efforts to help Damascus to recuperate and reach sustainable normalization. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have the VERELC agency with us. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. You've answered a part of my questions. But you wanted to ask something else, right? Yes. Well, I don't mind. Shoot. Well, there have been a lot of statements with regard to the EAEU, but could you comment on Armenia's membership in the CSTO and with regard to South Caucasus Railway? Can you comment on that as far as the first part of your question goes? I've already answered it to Lenturu. As far as South Caucasus Railway goes, we've given detailed explanation on that yesterday, but let me remind you of that. On the sidelines of the Eurasian Intergovernmental Council in Chulpona Town, August 6th to 7th this year, Deputy Chairman of the Government of the Russian Federation, Alexei Overchuk, commented on it. It was also commented on by Minister of the Economic Development of the Russian Federation, Maxim Reshetnikov. I'd like to remind you that the South Caucasus Railway is maximally responsible in fulfilling its duties. It has invested over 30 billion rubles, including in modernization of rolling stocks. It is important that the schedule was adjusted at the request of the Armenian side. The competency of Russian railway specialists helped Armenia to maintain competitive edge that today allowed to talk about unblocking communications in the region. The arguments of Yerevan that the Russian concession allegedly prevents Armenia from becoming the participant of logistical initiative does not correspond to reality. I think it is shameful to listen to it. All the clarifications have been given at all official levels, but Armenia is finding it hard to give any counter-arguments because there are no counter-arguments. Earlier, the issue on the transfer of the concession to anyone else was not put in light. It is highly likely that one can believe that the Armenian leadership is just being blackmailed. They're requesting it to remove the Russian factor in the transportation sector, and in exchange, they're promised multi-million investment and part in the projects, the economic viability of which is hardly seen. Well, these are dirty games of Western capitals to remove Russia from South Caucasus, so everyone understands what's happening there. If the Armenian leadership is okay with such arguments, well, I think first you should construct something of your own before you refuse something else that you already have that was given to you by your partners. Before you make any public statements, the partners sit at the table and in a business-like manner they discuss the current issues, they remove concerns. If there is an interest, as they claim in Yerevan, we can find a solution in a friendly key.
Nord Stream.
I have one question about Nord Stream. Can Germany identify those who have commissioned those attacks against Nord Stream, and how do you think should Europe react if there is proof of Ukraine's involvement? As we have already stated at one of recent briefings, the German Federal Prosecutor's Office has already issued an indictment against some Serhiy K. for collaborating some documents. You should not think that we have received it by some illegal means. No. as stated by the Ukrainian prosecutors, that he committed that crime. And one of his accomplices has also been detained recently in Croatia. This investigation is underway for as much as 4 years, and we continue to support the punishment for its perpetrators and for those who have commanded that attack. We have done our best for this investigation to be international, transparent, as they like to say in the West, and conducted by specialists and not by politicians. We have proposed to conduct this investigation under the auspices of the UN, and that has been done at the UN Security Council meeting by Mr. Nebenze. But who was against that? Germany's Western allies, and as for the European countries, the attitude is often politicized and driven by expediency. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called for halting the prosecution of the suspect involved in the pipeline sabotage and elevating them nearly to the status of modern-day heroes. Maybe Poland will award them the Eagle Order or the Order of the Two Eagles. It's their business, but any person who respects international law and national law knows that the destruction of civilian infrastructure, deliberately or indeliberately, is a terrorist attack. Investigation of such a terrorist attack that has brought so much environmental damage to the Baltic Sea. I'm not talking about flora and fauna, although all that should be mentioned, but that inflicted long-term, mid-term and short-term damage to energy security of the relevant countries and the European continent and the entire world. And now those consequences are not just decreasing, but they are being manifested even more. So that should be investigated and not written off due to some circumstances against Russia, and it was actually against Germany primarily. So I know that logics, we mention that daily, but it's the true Nazi logics. When a crime is justified, if it is committed against people of certain nationality. Thank you. Thank you. Is Embassy Live with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello, dear colleagues. Embassy Live media outlet. We have 2 questions on the 24th of August. Zelensky called on China to use its influence to cool the ardor, as they say, of Russian President Vladimir Putin amidst renewed nuclear rhetoric. So why are those claims addressed to Beijing and not to Russian officials directly? And is China ready to play the de-escalating role here? So we should seek for a reply with Zelensky or with his patrons. If he has made this statement, but it's just beyond adequacy, logics, and decency. It's not applicable to Zelensky. Those illegitimate and with a lot of problems with legitimacy. That leader, he makes commands to leaders of different countries, and requests, demands. It's unclear why. To do something with regard to other states, also sovereign states, their leaders. These are manifestations of a monster created by the West, and then he overgrew his creators. Because the creators, they need to be elected, they need to hold elections, but he has cancelled elections for himself. It's one of the manifestations, the very nature of Zelensky, how he has been created by the West, how he now treats the West. It's the manifestation of a crisis of international relations, of the global system today, that is possible today. They used to create some terrorist beasts locally. But now, just without training, turning him into a head of the state. Then gaining power and being the leaders of the international terrorist community, but now they aspired to turn the president of a state into international terrorist. Of course, it's something new in the approaches of the West and the crisis of the global system today. So I can add nothing here, but let us mention our relations with China. Russia and China have conducted, are conducting independent and global foreign policy. It's a rarity actually in today's world because it's based on a comprehensive approach. Moscow and Beijing do not form military political blocs similar to those created by the West, and our relations are not directed against third countries. All that is enshrined in the clear legal framework of the Russian-Chinese Treaty of Good Neighborliness, Friendship and Cooperation, the 25th anniversary of which we are marking this year. We do appreciate that Beijing maintains a balanced position regarding the events in Ukraine, has a clear understanding of the conflict's root causes, and has always advocated the assistance to peaceful solution. That's the assistance that Zelensky and his puppet masters lack. They obstruct a comprehensive and long-term resolution to the crisis. But that's actually weird for Zelensky, even that he even had the determination for such statements. Relations being at the highest historical level and are based on equal treatment, and it is in contrast with this subordination of the Kiev junta to its Western curators. So my next question, how would you comment on the statements by Azerbaijan Ambassador Rahman Mustafayev on the negative background surrounding Azerbaijan in the Russian media space? Actually, I can quote a positive background for Azerbaijan created by Sputnik information agency. It's not just an example of quality journalism, but an example of participation in the creation of, so to say, constructive background and information media background to facilitate international relations. There were no questions raised by the Azerbaijan side there, but unfortunately the Azerbaijan's side closed. Actually, it's not correct to say they stopped the work of this media outlet on the territory of their country, but how they treated journalists, you know. Thank God they came back home after so much time of imprisonment. But I have quoted this example. The specific area has been created in the coverage. It was professional work aimed at facilitation of the development of bilateral relations. No questions there on the agenda. On the news and events held by that information agency, it was closed by the relevant forces in Baku. They voiced their own position there, with which we could not agree. So what can we say? We regularly transfer materials to the Azerbaijan side. Blogging sphere with anti-Russian materials, inconsistent with reality, and it's not criticism, not a point of view. It's just some madness under the guise of objectiveness. And Azerbaijan is aware of that. We have many consultations, many contacts. We raise those issues, we exchange the relevant materials, and I'm sure the Azerbaijan ambassador in Moscow is well aware of how we facilitate in those issues of lies, distortion of the facts, or unworthy materials with regard to the sovereign state, the state of Azerbaijan. But I would repeat once again, it was created, it used to work well, perfectly. That observer of information space, it was a constructive and dignified stance, but unfortunately it was closed. Thank you. So I can only agree that the situation in the media sphere, it needs to be rectified. And we once again call upon the Azerbaijan side to discuss the problems accumulated, to find some ways to resolve them. We regularly do that. Some hot lines of the resolution of such issues, they have existed, and that approach would be in accordance with the letter and spirit of the declaration signed in 2022 on the 22nd of February by the presidents of our countries, and in Russia, working constructively. Representatives of Azerbaijan media, STV, Real TV, Telegraph Agency, Azertaj, we have held conferences with Azerbaijan journalists, media forums, round tables. So you understand all that it can be developed and it should be developed in this area, and all the questions, issues that arise should be resolved with mutual respect and constructively. So I'm sure that the Azerbaijan ambassador, the incumbent and the previous one, they just know about this constructive interaction experience. Thank you. Thank you. Is Bolt News with us, if that's it for you? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. The colleagues have already asked a similar question, and you have replied in detail. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleagues. Goodbye to you then. And as far as I understand, the next briefing will be held in Vladivostok on the sidelines of the Economic Forum. So, prosperity to you. See you again.